Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today is 21st June 2024 and we have few important articles for today's discussion. So all these are very important articles and they are also exam relevant articles. Now the first article that we are going to start is about the amphibians, right? So there are a number of articles. First we just look into the general overview of what are those articles that we are going to discuss today. So recently an amphibian species was discovered in Kaziranga National Park, right? We all knew that the Kaziranga National Park is located in Assam, right? So Kaziranga National Park in Assam. So after that, apart from this amphibian species, we also discuss about the genetically modified crops and concerns with respect to the genetically modified crops and how genetically modified crops would ensure food security along with the existing or increased levels of greenhouse gas emissions, because agriculture sector is also a major contributor of the greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So we will understand the GM crops and its concerns on human health and environment also. And after that, International Yoga Day. Today is International Yoga Day. So therefore in this context we will understand about this International Yoga Day. And after that we also have another very important article in regulation of artificial intelligence in India. Okay, so artificial intelligence and its regulations in India and how the regulation and the development of artificial intelligence in Japan would actually provides India a framework for the regulation and promotion of artificial intelligence in our country. And after that we will also understand another very important topic, so that is adalats or lok adalats. So lok adalats were an alternative dispute resolution agencies that were created by the National Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. So therefore in this context we will understand what are these lok adalats, when they were constituted, what are the aims and objectives of creating these lok adalats. So everything we will understand in a very detailed manner. So these are the articles that we're going to discuss, and this is the basic overview of the articles that we will be discussing today. And before proceeding that, yesterday I have given one practice question for prelims examination. Now this is also a very important question, but because recently 2024 prelims examination, a question based on the same lines was asked. So that is the countries which have been sharing their borders with the Northern Sea. So in a similar way I have asked another question. So this Baltic Sea is also very close to this Northern Sea. So therefore it is very important for you to identify the bordering countries around Baltic Sea, Northern Sea and also Caspian Sea and Black Sea. Now in this context we'll try to understand what are the countries which have been sharing their borders with the Baltic Sea, right? So before actually solving this, we'll look into the map of Baltic Sea and what are those countries which have been sharing their borders with the Baltic Sea, right? Now the countries that are actually given here are Norway, Sweden, Russia, Denmark and Germany. So how many of these countries are sharing their borders with the Baltic Sea? Now we'll understand this, right? So this is a Baltic Sea. Okay, so this is where the Baltic Sea is actually located. And apart from Baltic Sea, so you can see on the western side of this Baltic Sea somewhere here, so you can also see the Northern Sea, and this is the Gulf of Bothnia. Now whenever we talk about the countries with which this Baltic Sea has been sharing its borders, and in fact Finland has a border, and Russia also shares its border with the Baltic Sea, Sweden shares its border, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Germany and Denmark, right? So all these countries have been sharing their borders with the Baltic Sea. But on the other hand, Norway is located here, but Norway is not sharing its borders with the Baltic Sea, but Norway was given in the options. See, you can clearly see that Norway is not sharing its borders with the Baltic Sea, so therefore it is wrong option. However, on the other hand, Sweden shares its borders with Baltic Sea. So you can see here Sweden shares its borders with Baltic Sea, and Russia also shares its borders with Baltic Sea, right? So Russia also has its borders with Baltic Sea, and Denmark and Germany also shares their borders with Baltic Sea. So therefore the correct answer for this question is option C, only 4, right? So the countries which have been sharing their borders with the Baltic Sea, including Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Russia and Sweden. So all these countries have been sharing their borders with the Baltic Sea. So therefore it is very important question. You just remember this. Now we'll proceed on to the next prelims practice question for today. Now, which of the following option best describes Kavach system, which is recently seen in news? And it is recently seen in news, and at the same time we have also discussed about this Kavach system. Now options are, it is a two-factor authentication to the user for accessing their government email service, first option. Option B, it is an automatic train protection system across the country's rail network. Option C, it is a unique national hackathon to identify innovation concepts and technology solutions for addressing the security challenges of the 21st century. And D, none of the above. So this is important question, and I hope all of you know the answer for this question. So try to answer this question in the comment section, and the correct answer with explanation I'll be providing you tomorrow. So now, without any delay, we'll proceed on to this discussion, right? So first, very important article, that is a limbless amphibian found in Kaziranga for the first time, right? So this is a limbless amphibian. Limbless amphibian was found in Kaziranga for the first time. Now we'll understand about this. What was this limbless amphibian that is found in this Kaziranga National Park, right? A limbless amphibian has been added to the fauna. Now we all knew about the fauna and flora. Fauna is animals and flora is plant species, right? So this is a limbless amphibian that is newly discovered in the Kaziranga National Park. So this Kaziranga National Park is 1307 square kilometers, and it is a national park. Side by side, it is also a tiger reserve. It is located in Assam. Okay, so now when we talk about this limbless amphibian that is newly discovered in Kaziranga National Park, a team of herpetologists. So a team of herpetologists recorded a striped caecilian. Okay, so this is a striped caecilian in the tiger reserve for the first time during a rapid herpetofauna survey. So herpetologists have been conducting this herpetofauna survey, and as part of this herpetofauna survey, so they have identified this striped caecilian. So that is a limbless amphibian. Now in this context, we will try to understand what is herpetofauna. Now whenever we talk about this herpetofauna, so here fauna is animal species. Now herpetofauna essentially includes both reptiles and amphibians, and therefore reptiles and amphibians collectively called as herpetofauna, right? So we all knew that amphibians are the species which can live in both water and land, and there are also reptile species as well. So therefore reptiles and amphibian species are collectively called as herpetofauna. And in fact, so these are the least studied but most vulnerable to the climate change and climate change concerns, because with increasing climate change, what has been happening? The extinction of the species has becoming a common phenomenon. Now when we talk about this caecilians are limbless amphibians, right? So they are limbless amphibians that spend most of their lives in burrowed under soil, right? So for example, when we talk about earthworms, right? So earthworms also very often live under the soil burrows. So in a similar way, these caecilians are also limbless amphibians, and that spend most of their time, most of their lives in burrowed under soil. And in fact, these are least studied, but at the same time they are most vulnerable to the climate change, and the extinction threat of the species is high with respect to these herpetofauna or amphibian species. And in fact, these Caecilians are ancient species, so they were existing from several times on this planet Earth, and their presence actually holds a critical linkages for finding out or tracing evolution and intercontinental speciation, right? So different continents, the species variation differs. So therefore this Caecilians will actually help us understand the evolution and intercontinental speciation across the world. Now we will try to understand very briefly about Kaziranga National Park. This Kaziranga National Park or Kaziranga Tiger Reserve is located in Assam, and in fact it is very well known for its diverse ecosystem. Now diverse ecosystem in the sense that it has a different ecosystems which were actually existing in one single national park. For example, we talk about floodplains, wetlands, grasslands and hill tracts on periphery, and they actually provides an ideal habitat for herpetofauna. So they provide an ideal habitat for this herpetofauna, the Kaziranga National Park. So this tiger reserve actually houses 24 species of amphibians and 74 species of reptiles. Since it has been supporting a diverse ecosystem, so therefore it is having 24 species of amphibians and 74 species of reptiles. And similarly, it is also home to 21 of 29 species of tortoises and freshwater turtles which are found in India. And since this particular species has been found in the Kaziranga National Park or Kaziranga Tiger Reserve, a training and sensitization program is being organized by the relevant parties to enhance the skills of the forest personals, right? So when we enhance the skills and training of the forest personals about these species, we can undertake measures for their conservation and protection. So this herpetofauna identification and conservation and the training or skill development with respect to identification and conservation of these different species ensures better management and also protection of these vital species in their natural habitat. And after that, we need to talk about GM crops. Can GM crops actually promise food security? Now we'll try to understand what are these genetically modified crops, right? Now what are the major concerns of the genetically modified crops? So is it feasible that if we promote genetically modified crops in the present context to achieve food security? And what are the concerns of genetically modified crops with respect to the present levels of climate change, and what should be the way forward? We will try to understand this in a very detailed manner. Now first and foremost, we try to define what are genetically modified crops. So it is very important that first we need to understand what are these GM crops or genetically modified crops. So the definition for genetically modified crops is provided by the World Health Organization. Now according to this definition, GM crops are those crops which are derived from organisms whose genetic material has been modified. Okay, so every organism or every species have their own genetic material, and the genetic material of the organism is being modified or changed in a way that does not occur naturally. Now imagine that cotton plant. So there is a BT cotton variety, and that is a GM BT cotton variety. Now in cotton variety, the genetic structure is actually changed. So otherwise this genetic structure is not naturally occurring. Rather, in this cotton variety, genetic structure is changed and modified, which is actually not naturally occurring through the introduction of alien gene or foreign gene into that different organism, so that it would benefit the humanity, and it would increases the productivity of the crop, and it also ensures the resistance of the crop to different insects or any other species which have been impacting the cotton crop. So another definition of GM crops is that the genetically modified crops are plants in agriculture. The DNA of those crops or plants is changed or modified using the genetic engineering technique, so that we can get the desired results from those plant and animal species, right? Now, what is the context of this particular GM crops? Now, the context is that a new gene revolution is being promoted as a solution for increasing global food demand. Now, understand that the global population has been rapidly increasing, right? So global population has been rapidly increasing, but with the rapid increase of global population, the food production is not increasing. So therefore, in this context, we require gene revolution, and through gene revolution we can produce more GM crops, and GM crops can actually meet the demand of the food demand of growing population, thereby ensuring food security for the population across the world. And at the same time, in recent times, agriculture has also one of the worst impacted sector because of climate change. So the idea is that on one hand, we address climate change, and at the same time, on the other hand, we address the food insecurity or food security issues through genetically modified or GM crops. So that is the idea of GM crops. Now, what was the World Economic Forum's view on genetic GM crops or genetically modified crops? And in fact, World Economic Forum supports GM technology, and in fact, World Economic Forum itself believes that it actually ensures food security, because now GM crops actually significantly enhances the production of or the productivity of crops, and because of that reason, World Economic Forum believes that GM crops can address or help achieve food security across the world. Okay, so GM crops inherently have certain advantages. In the sense that they can withstand to drought, they can withstand to the flood, and we can produce the short variety of different crops, and they we can produce the food in a much shorter period of time. And they are also resistant to insects, they are also resistant to salinity. So therefore, a wide variety of crops can be produced through GM technology, and because of that reason, the World Economic Forum believes that GM crops would ensure food security for the global population. And it is also expected that by 2050, global population would reach around 10 billion. So because of that reason, World Economic Forum expecting that we have to produce more GM crops, so that increases the food production. And in fact, in recent times, research is being done to produce new strains of rice variety, maize, wheat, potato, and cassava, right? So these are staple foods across the world, right? And when we do research to produce these GM crops, so they can actually survive extreme weather and new climate induced diseases also, and thereby we can ensure sustainable and reliable food production. We can say that resilient food production systems across the world. And in fact, latest bioengineering technologies actually help plants and soils capture and store atmospheric carbon, right? So whenever we develop these bioengineering technologies, so they can help plants and soils capture and store atmospheric carbon, potentially reducing planet heating carbon. And after that, there were also projects which are optimizing the photosynthesis of crops like maize and rice to improve yields and reduce the atmospheric carbon. So these are a number of advantages that we have with respect to the GM crops and production of GM crops. Now, when we talk about this industrial scale genetically modified organisms, they perpetuate the climate change. So how they actually perpetuate climate change? Industrial scale genetically modified organisms. See, this is also one of the concern with respect to the genetically modified organisms. So these genetically modified organisms actually perpetuate climate change. So this is what the critics have been arguing that, right? So GM crops have both advantages and disadvantages. So when we talk about the advantages, that we have already mentioned about that, right? So it helps us increase productivity, and it also results in ensuring a resilient food systems at this current stage, and that helps us meet the growing food demand for the global population. But on the other hand, there were critics have been arguing that the industrial scale genetically modified organisms can actually perpetuate climate change. How? We'll understand that as well. Right, so GM crops can actually sustain an agro-industrial system. So it will lead to an agro-industrial system, and this agro-industrial system will actually responsible for significant greenhouse gas emissions over a period of time. Now, the climate change and global warming are mainly because of the greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. However, when we produce more and more GMO crops, that leads to an agro-industrial system, and this agro-industrial system would release more emissions into the atmosphere, causing the global warming and further aiding the climate change. However, so when we talk about the current agriculture and food systems, they alone contributing to 1/3 of the global greenhouse gas emissions, right? So they have been contributing to the 1/3 of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So these genetically modified organisms often involve large-scale monocultures. So they involve large-scale monocultures. Now, large-scale monoculture, or monocropping, in the sense that we focus on only few crops, and monocropping would not be the best idea. Rather, we need to promote crop diversification. So crop diversification is very, very important for agro ecosystems resilience and sustainability. Monocropping will lead to spread of new diseases at a much faster pace, and that will also impact overall crop production and productivity. And GMO crops would involve large scale monoculture, and that requires significant amount of artificial fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and the irrigation also. And this particular system is criticized for being too much of energy intensive, right? So we need to use too much of energy whenever we are producing these crops. So too much energy usage would not be a good idea, because we are looking for the energy efficient sectors, right? So energy efficiency is very, very important in the present context, but this GMO crop and the agro industrial systems which are created by GMO crops may be energy intensive and unsustainable also. So they also benefit a large agro industrial companies that dominate seed, food, pesticide, and fertilizer markets. Now we need to understand the present scenario. So what would be the present scenario with respect to the GMO crops? And in fact, over a half of harvested cropland in US uses genetically modified seeds, right? So over half of the total harvested croplands in US using genetically modified seeds only. But on the other hand, in India, we have a very limited entry, or a very limited use of genetically modified crops or products. So it is being allowed to genetically modified cotton or BT cotton. So there were still approvals pending for BT mustard and BT brinjal also, right? So despite proliferation of GM crops across the world, it did not address the food insecurity problem. Okay, so the food insecurity remained widespread, because as I have already told you that in US, over a half of harvested cropland uses these genetically modified seeds. However, with 250 million people in nearly 60 countries are experiencing the crisis level food insecurity, right? So there is no guarantee that if we use these genetically modified crops, we can address food security, or we can address the food insecurity problem. So there is no such guarantee about that. However, there were successful campaigns in countries like Philippines. So campaign is about the production moratoriums on certain GM crops, keeping in mind the health and environmental concerns with respect to production of GM crops. However, rather we need to focus on non-genetically modified ecological crops as a food security solution, rather substantially depending on the GM crops for ensuring food security. Because the resistance to genetically modified organisms persists across the world. So why there was a criticism and resistance to the GMO crops was because the skepticism that was prevalent and their safety and ecological impact, right? So it has a safety and ecological impact concerns and health impact concerns. Because of that reason, there is a strong resistance for these GM crops. However, we need to focus on developing non-genetically modified ecological approaches. So, however, they also facing a lot of challenges due to limited research support, limited funding, and most of the funding comes from the large agrobiotic companies rather from the government. So therefore, government and government research institutions should actively engage in non-GM ecological approaches for ensuring food security here. So ecological and non-GM crops, they aim to produce toxic-free food and nurture biodiverse ecosystems that can resist and mitigate the climate change. And therefore, there is an ongoing development of ecological and non-GM seed food nutrition systems to address food security in warming world or increasing climate change in this world. Now, what should be the way forward in this context? So the way forward is that enhanced regulatory oversight and support for ecological practices is very, very important. So when we talk about the enhanced regulatory oversight, it is in the context of safety concerns of GM crops or GM food, and at the same time their ecological impact. So their ecological impact and at the same time safety of GM crops is very, very important, and that need to be kept in mind. And we need to support ecological practices or non-GM ecological crops, so that ensures food security. So there is a need to strengthen existing regulations to ensure safe development, testing and deployment of GM crops while supporting R&D of non-GM ecological farming practices to ensure food security. So side by side, we need to focus on creating large-scale public awareness, and there should be inclusive research funding also. Okay, so comprehensive public education campaigns are very, very important here to inform communities about the benefits and risks of genetically modified or non-genetically modified crops in promoting informed decision making. So this should be the possible way forward for genetically modified crops. And now we need to focus more on ecological non-GM crops, right? So that should be the best way forward because it addresses climate change and it also addresses the safety concerns of consumer health, and at the same time it also ensures food security of larger population across the world. Now next important article is, today is 10th International Yoga Day. We will try to understand what is International Yoga Day, what was its purpose, when it was launched. So the context is that Prime Minister Narendra Modi leading celebrations of 10th International Yoga Day. So today is 21st June 2024 and this day is announced by the United Nations as International Yoga Day. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi leading International Yoga Day at Sher-e-Kashmir International Convention Center in Srinagar, right? Now, when we talk about this International Yoga Day, so it is observed annually on June 21st worldwide. Across the world, June 21st is celebrated as International Yoga Day and it is celebrated since 2014. So this is to celebrate the practice of yoga which originated in ancient India. So in fact, yoga is renowned for its physical and mental health benefits. Now, if you look into the world, so world has been facing number of physical and mental health challenges because we are neglecting our mental health as well as physical health. However, yoga is a best for ensuring a holistic development of both holistic improvement of both physical health as well as mental well-being also. And in fact, this idea of declaring yoga as Yoga Day, International Yoga Day, was first proposed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi at his UN address in September 2014. In December 2014, India's permanent representative to the UN introduced a draft resolution in the United Nations General Assembly to declare June 21st as International Yoga Day. So the first International Yoga Day was successfully celebrated on June 21st, 2015. In June 21st, 2015, the first International Yoga Day was successfully celebrated across the world, right? And when we talk about this significance of 21st June, so why 21st June was chosen for this particular International Yoga Day? Because June 21st was chosen because it is the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, right? So in the Northern Hemisphere, June 21st is in fact the longest day. So therefore, it has been symbolizing spiritual significance across various cultures across the world, not just in India. However, when we talk about this Hindu mythology, so this day actually marks a transition of Dakshinayana. Okay, so this actually marks a transition of Dakshinayana, and it is associated with the first yogi Shiva, who began teaching yoga to humanity, and that is why on this day it is announced that it is International Yoga Day. Now, another very important article is about Lok Adalats, right? So what are these Lok Adalats? So first we'll try to understand this and why these Lok Adalats were established, and some basic details about this Lok Adalats we will try to understand, right? So Lok Adalat is a system of alternative dispute resolution. Now when we talk about the dispute resolution, we have courts. Okay, so we have an integrated judiciary across different levels. But on the other hand, Lok Adalats actually promotes the alternative dispute resolution. So it was developed and it is also called as People's Court. Lok Adalats, it actually translates into People's Court. And the system of Lok Adalats is based on the principles of Parameshwar of Gram Panchayats, so which were also proposed by Mahatma Gandhi. The idea of Gram Panchayats so was one of the Gandhian principle. Okay, so it was one of the Gandhian ideal. In a similar way, Lok Adalat was also the Gandhian idea. So the idea of Lok Adalat was mainly advocated by Justice P.N. Bhagwati, and he was the former Chief Justice of India. And in fact, they are periodically held for exercising such jurisdiction as they determine. However, the first Lok Adalat was held on March 14, 1982 in Gujarat. However, the context is that recently the Supreme Court of India has announced that a special Lok Adalat is scheduled for upcoming months. Okay, so a special Lok Adalat is being scheduled for the upcoming months, and we'll understand what was the reason behind Supreme Court's declaration of conducting special Lok Adalat. So Supreme Court's decision of conducting this special Lok Adalats in the coming months is to enhance accessible and efficient justice delivery for all the segments of the society, right? So irrespective of financial status, irrespective of caste, irrespective of region, ensuring adequate access to justice and justice delivery to all the sections of the society is the main idea behind conducting Lok Adalat by the Supreme Court. Okay, so the special Lok Adalat is part of efforts to expedite the resolution of pending cases. So it will expedite the resolution of the cases which are pending across different levels. And in fact, this initiative aims to resolve the pending cases through the amicable settlement. Now, amicable settlement actually means that so the issues are settled at Lok Adalat in such a manner so the award is acceptable for the both parties which have approached this Lok Adalat. Now, in fact, at the end of 2023, Supreme Court was saddled with around 80,400 pending cases. Now, the burden of pending cases is one of the challenges that Indian judiciary has been facing. So in fact, the Lok Adalat as an alternative dispute resolution agency will also help settle disputes amicably, and they also reduces burden on the judiciary. However, when we talk about these pending cases with respect to the high courts, district courts and the Supreme Court, government is the main litigant as more than 70 cases. A litigant is the government, both central government, state government, or governments across various levels, right? So when we talk about the Lok Adalat and its main role, so Lok Adalat is a system of alternative dispute resolution, as we have already understood, and it is in fact an integral part of India's overall judicial system, so that also delivers justice to all the people, especially the poor and underprivileged sections of the society. And in fact, Lok Adalats delivers justice, and it focuses on alternative dispute resolution in an amicable manner outside the formal court proceedings, right? So when we talk about all the details with respect to the Lok Adalats, these Lok Adalats facilitate a quick settlements, and at the same time they save time, cost and energy for both litigants and judges also, because when we look into the mainstream judiciary, pending cases is a problem, higher vacancies is a problem. So therefore Lok Adalats as an alternative dispute resolution systems will actually address the pendency of cases, and they also provide access to justice to all the sections of the society. So in this way they save time, they save costs and energy of all the parties which are part of this Lok Adalat system, or which want their case to be heard by these Lok Adalat systems. So Lok Adalat essentially emphasizes on negotiation and compromise in an informal setting, not a formal setting, rather informal setting. Now one thing that we need to understand here, the directive principles of state policy which aims at ensuring welfare state in India actually have one article, that is Article 39A. So this Article 39A of the Indian Constitution mandates that, so this was in fact included in the directive principles of state policy by 42nd constitutional amendment. So this 39A of the Constitution of India mandates that state to ensure that the legal system promotes justice on the basis of equal opportunity, right? So equal access to justice and free legal aid is what is mentioned in Article 39A of the Indian Constitution. However, when we talk about the statutory status which is being provided for these Lok Adalats, so there was a NALSA Act, National Legal Services Authorities Act. So this NALSA Act of 1987 also provides the statutory status. Okay, so it provides statutory status for the Lok Adalats. So that is how these Lok Adalats have been created, and which hear disputes across different parts of India. So it provides a statutory status, and National Legal Services Authorities Act and other legal service institutions conduct these Lok Adalats. So Lok Adalat can actually make awards, decisions which are deemed to be decree of a civil court. So whenever this Lok Adalats provides an award, so this award is known as an award given by the civil court, and this particular award is final and it is also binding on all the parties concerned. Now further details of this Lok Adalats and National Legal Services Authorities Act, that was created by Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. So it is being headed by the executive chairman, and this executive chairman is the second senior most judge of the Supreme Court. However, Chief Justice of India is known as the patron chief of the National Legal Services Authorities Act. Now one thing you have to understand here, so for the National Legal Services Authorities Act, the patron chief is Chief Justice of India. However, the executive chairman of the NALSA was the second senior most judge of the Supreme Court, right? So this is about the NALSA, and now we'll focus on the regulation of artificial intelligence, or developing a framework for regulation of artificial intelligence in India. So the article has been talking about India should look towards Japan for an artificial intelligence regulation framework. So we will understand this in a very detailed manner. So what exactly we can learn from Japan with respect to artificial intelligence regulation and its framework, how can we develop this framework? Now the context is that as artificial intelligence technology rapidly advances, or across the world, artificial intelligence as an emerging technology, rapidly progressing and rapidly advancing. So therefore, India is exploring how to regulate and foster this artificial intelligence. So now how can we regulate and foster artificial intelligence? Balancing potential economic and social benefits, right? Because artificial intelligence actually have potential economic and social benefits with concerns about copyright, human rights, privacy, and fairness. So all these things have to be addressed whenever we talk about the regulation of artificial intelligence and developing a framework, a proper framework for regulating artificial intelligence. However, so Japan's approach with respect to regulation of artificial intelligence can actually provide valuable lessons for India to learn, and thereby we can also regulate artificial intelligence on the same lines that the Japan has done. So however, one challenge with respect to regulation of artificial intelligence, how can we balance innovation and regulation? Because artificial intelligence, no doubt, it is an emerging technology. Now, if we regulate artificial intelligence, so that will lead to the regulation of innovation also. Okay, so it will be regulation of artificial intelligence or imposing excessive restrictions or regulations on artificial intelligence actually roadblock to the innovation. So therefore, the main challenge is that we need to balance innovation with regulation. Now, in this context, when we look into the Japan, so Japan government actually acts as a facilitator. Okay, so it is not the primary innovator, rather it is a facilitator of innovation. And whenever it is a facilitator of innovation, it actually encourages the private sector to take part in the artificial intelligence and develop new technologies within the artificial intelligence. So therefore, it is a major driver and a major facilitator of the development of artificial intelligence. So therefore, the government institution's role is to provide support through governance and coordination across different sectors within the artificial intelligence network. So that is how India should also act as a facilitator, and it should drive the innovation in the area of artificial intelligence rather on its own becoming the innovator. So there is a need to encourage the private sector participation in artificial intelligence. And after that, so we must focus on funding and investment areas also. So because Japan as of now established significant funding for the generative artificial intelligence, right? So when we talk about the funding pattern of Japan model of artificial intelligence development, so it has actually focused on decentralized method of artificial intelligence development. Now, decentralized in the sense that the funding is allocated for generative artificial intelligence, domestic data centers, local chip production, and with incentives and subsidies in collaboration with cloud computing providers and tech companies. You can clearly see that how they have decentralized funding across different sectors within the artificial intelligence. But with respect to India, it is a centralized way of procurement rather than a decentralized way of developing artificial intelligence. So that is what we need to learn with respect to Indian way of artificial intelligence. And after that, when we talk about the artificial intelligence, so it is very important that we need to achieve government, industry, and academia collaboration. So the government, industry, academia collaboration will actually promote innovation, right? So it will lead to the new emerging innovation and technologies development within the artificial intelligence. For example, artificial intelligence Japan R&D network actually exemplifies effective collaboration between different stakeholders, for example, between universities, research institutions, private sector, and even the global tech companies. Okay, so therefore, the development of artificial intelligence and innovation, which is guiding the development of artificial intelligence, is more robust in Japan. However, India has the necessary infrastructure for such a collaboration between different stakeholders, but it needs to strengthen these partnerships. So even though we have infrastructure, so the collaborations that we have as of now, they're not enough. We need to further strengthen these partnerships and collaborations. And apart from that, we need to focus on building domestic competency also. So this domestic competency with respect to innovation and regulation of artificial intelligence is very important to explore the potential of artificial intelligence and use it for the economic growth and economic development. Right? So when we talk about this large language models to feed artificial intelligence, so Japan is developing its own large language models. However, so India has also been developing these large language models that would benefit from the government support. So therefore, we can leverage existing India's expertise in citizen-centric technology. So we also providing various citizen-centric technology solutions across India. So therefore, we need to leverage that particular expertise in this field, and similar initiatives can promote and encourage artificial intelligence as a global public good. So after that, there should be a strategic artificial intelligence adoption also in this area. Artificial intelligence transformative potential actually necessitates urgent action from Indian policymakers. So it actually requires urgent action from Indian policymaker. Observing Japan's balanced approach can actually help India foster innovation while bringing in necessary regulation for artificial intelligence to address all those issues. However, what should be the India's strategy going ahead with respect to innovation in the field of artificial intelligence and regulation of artificial intelligence? So first and foremost, we need to have a robust framework similar to what Japan has launched, right? A similar robust framework, so which is having the innovation aspect and at the same time the regulation aspect. And in this particular framework, we need to place the private sector at the center of artificial intelligence efforts, supported by relevant government ministries. So that is very, very important here. So after that, we need to focus on investment in technology also. So technology investment and investment in research and development with respect to artificial intelligence is very, very important. So this decentralized innovation focused funding, so akin to Japan's model, can drive India's artificial intelligence advancements. And after that, we need to think about the cultural compatibility, right? So whenever we think about this cultural compatibility, recognizing cultural similarities with Japan, India can adopt an artificial intelligence regulatory framework so that balances innovation, regulation, and addressing unique societal needs as well. So this kind of a strategy that India should follow with respect to the innovation in the field of artificial intelligence and at the same time regulation also. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much for being with us. So please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.